Thanks for that intro, Noah, and thanks to Jay and the HFI team for having me along today. Just going to share my screen for you. I will need to, of course, actually share the screen. I'll start with a nice pleasant view before I launch into it. Great. Okay, have we got visibility of the correct screen there, Noah?
Yep, I see it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Right, so quite a daunting act to follow with Eric and Apala there leading the way with their very great insights into what's happening in the world of UX. I'm here to provide hopefully a bit of light relief, I guess, to that. Just still on the topic of advances and adaptation in UX engineering, but potentially looking at more from the roles of people fulfilling the UX space. And specifically, I'll be going through a couple of short insights, or it's a short overview of insights into how the business analysis and usability analysis roles combine with the identifying commonalities, how they complement each other and their activities, and how they can support each other as well. So what I'm going to cover today, I'll give you a little bit more about background as to why I'm talking to you about this. I'll also be talking about what is business analysis, for those of you who are not familiar with the concept, what the benefits are of usability analysis from a business perspective and how I try and sell that to the business. And then also I'd like to kind of call out through an example of a standardized process, what some of the different activities are that the usability and business analysis will perform at different stages, how they both have commonalities again, and how they can support and complement each other in that space. And then I'll hopefully have some time for some questions. So a little bit about me. As you can probably tell from my funny voice, I am from New Zealand originally. I spent 3 years there as a software tester before moving to the UK. I've been here ever since. I joined a company called Practical Law, which is an online legal know-how company. And that's where I qualified as a business analyst. And then I also discovered the world of user experience through a website overhaul that we did, and understood that there's actually a role that people actually get paid to do user experience and user experience design and things like that. And the whole thing was fascinating to me. So when I moved to Linklaters, which is where I've been ever since, I was fortunate enough to be sponsored to get certified by HFI in the CUA and CXA diplomas. And ever since I've had those qualifications, I've been practicing that as part of the work I do at Linklaters. Just so you're aware, it's more internally focusing the work I do for an internal audience rather than an external audience. Though recently I have been able to work on projects that do actually engage with our clients as well. And that's proved very fruitful for spreading the word of UX. And in my time there, I've taken it from being something which is a nice to have on our solutions that we provide to our infrastructure to something that is a critical part of what we do in the day today. So finding a common ground, I like to think that we are both two groups of people who care, and we care about people. From a business analyst point of view, my satisfaction comes from helping people solve problems or shape the solutions for their problems in the workplace. And similarly, I know user experience people do that from a user-centered point of view to ensure that people are helping that way. So given that we're both given businesses involve users and we're both trying to help the users, I think we're actually both trying to achieve the same thing here, but maybe potentially with a different lens. So hopefully we can work together to achieve this common goal. What is business analysis? So for those of you who are not familiar with it, we get heavily involved in change, in any kind of business change. And whether that's developing new or existing solutions, improving processes which either are independent of or align or support or are supported by technology. Also, we get involved strategic planning, so doing analysis to help inform business decisions around where they should be going. So a lot of that you can see there's already similar hats can be worn in the UX space in there as well. But most commonly, when people say to me, what does a BA do? I say, well, I'm like the translator between IT and the rest of the business world. So I go to the business and understand what the problems are that they need solving and document what the key elements are of that. And then I can translate that and put it to the IT department and whatever needs and methods that they need to support that. Likewise, if there's any kind of technical things, decisions that need to be made by the business, then it's my job to translate those into layman's terms so that the business can understand what it is that they need to be deciding upon and make an informed decision that they're happy with. So when you think about the fact that you've got usability analysis looking at trying to, build in effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction, user experience, looking at experience and satisfaction, web accessibility or accessibility, just trying to make things available to people. And then you've got business analysis looking at trying to do the right thing for the business, as well as the users within that business. We're going to try and hit that sweet spot that I've indicated with the star on the Venn diagram there. And I think that, working together, we can look to achieve that. I'm calling out the slide on accessibility legislation. So one of the reasons why I think it's important to call this out is a number of you, especially based in the UK and Europe, will be aware that the public sector now, there's legislation that's just been implemented this year where the public sector must provide accessibility to all their content and infrastructure for internal and external. So, and usually whatever happens here will filter down to the private sector as well. It's worth noting that because I can see that there'll be a lot more job opportunities or a lot more situations where the usability and user experience analysts will be, or designers will be brought into these organizations where they previously weren't used to help address this particular legal requirement for a solution. So therefore, you'll often come across, interact with embedded business analysts. And so I think having this bit of insight that I'm hopefully sharing with you today may help facilitate bridging the divides, helping to form a really cohesive, well-worked unit to ultimately address the needs of the users. And similarly in the UK, we have the Equalities Act, and in America, which the Americans will now well know, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is something to bear in mind that there's already been some pretty big litigation for not meeting accessibility standards for some businesses in the States. So I think what happens in the States tends to filter down to other parts of the world as well. So something to bear in mind there. When I'm looking at the requirements for any kind of solution, I tend to take a 360 view. And I like to think now with user experience, with my usability hat on, I have a 365 view in a way. Because there's a lot of commonalities with the information that we need to elicit to deliver the end solutions. But some of the key considerations that I look at from an external point of view, which do touch heavily on user experience as well, and the user experience in that space. So you've got the political aspects, so there's internal politics in the organisation, but then also external, such as local and national government policies and initiatives, which may influence the business, how they operate, and what they're required to do. The economic side of things, so looking at the budget for project, organisational financial situation and sources of funding. And also there's the external economic aspect, things if people are going into recession or that kind of thing that need to be considered that may influence business change. The social aspect, so trends, changing tastes, changing behaviours and perceptions of social norms. Technological, and an instance of where I work, is it better to go off the shelf or is it better to build something bespoke? Does technology exist now that didn't to deliver efficiency, which we couldn't realise, say, 2 to 5 years ago? On the legal side of things, you've got compliance and business rules, so things like GDPR, or internally business rules for us at a law firm, cloud storage versus on-premises storage for maintaining security, and that's often driven by our clients influencing what our business rules are. Also, the accessibility point I made on government software or public sector software and things like that. And there's also the environmental issues, so green issues such as reducing waste, recycling, noise pollution, and other environmental policies, both externally but also internally. It's a big driver, especially now we're working from home more at my organisation, that we are trying to print less, and so we're looking at solutions that will reduce the need for that. So what are some of the benefits of usability analysis from a business perspective? Now I know that one of my fellow panelists, Mary Michaels, is going to be doing a big talk on the ROI side of things. So my question there around what are the KPIs you'd use to measure the return on investment for these benefits, maybe some of the questions that you raise in response to this, and if you could put in the Q&A panel, that would be really great. I'm really like to draw on people's expertise and experience and how you justify or convince the business to put the time and investment into usability analysis, which is something I'm battling every project I go on. But I'm getting there and I'm winning, which is great news. So having faster and higher uptake of adoption of new tools and features. So from an internal perspective, it's the quicker you can realize those benefits, so the less amount of training, the slow, that learning curve, getting over that quicker means that you're going to start saving money and turning around results. The time and cost savings with tasks completed more efficiently, that is really big deal. In law firms especially, where you've got fee earners who, say, for 6 minutes worth of work will charge £300 for that time. So you don't want them spending that time filling out timesheets. You want them going about and doing business development activities. So anything you can do to increase efficiencies, to reduce admin tasks and to get the job done is going to be hugely well received. Reducing training support and support costs is a big one, obviously. So less time making the training, delivering the training, and paying for people to attend the training is a big one. As also, less support calls. This is all stuff I know we've learned on the course, but it's key stuff to easily sell it because you can put a monetary value behind a lot of this. Ensuring the interface is accessible by all users. So in the UK, if 1/5 of the population has some kind of disability, obviously from an internal point of view, we want to make sure that we're providing an environment which people want to work in, because people will buy in and use services of companies which they are regarded as great places to work. But also it's looking at the general care for the employees. But then externally, obviously, it makes sense from an e-commerce perspective, in that you're reaching out to that potential market. Reducing the likelihood of physical issues such as RSI and other injuries occurring through poor design. This is what I sort of think is more of a long-term goal, or long-term benefit. So, while someone who is using the tool might feel the impact immediately or quite short-term, actually the company might not realize the cost of that until they're having to support recovery of a person who has suffered from this, and also employing someone to do the work while that person is recovering. So there's kinds of more longer term thinking with that respect to help sell it. And then having users return time and time again. Obviously, that's something that is pretty obvious from an e-commerce side of things, or when you're providing a service externally. But internally, it's more about stopping people doing massive workarounds to deliver to do the same task because they hate the solution or they can't use the solution you've provided them, because that introduces a whole bunch of inefficiencies, and the company has wasted a whole lot of money putting something in place which doesn't work and is not fit for purpose. Okay, so I mentioned that I was going to talk about how the activities in the different roles can combine, complement, and support each other. So I'm going to go through this in a little bit more detail. So when I'm often asked what's the difference between business analysis and usability analysis, in a really high level simplified way, because you have to start simple with people who don't understand the detail of this and the nuances. Business analysis ensures that we have the functionality and processes we need in a solution to help perform tasks and to do our jobs. Usability analysis looks at the ability to use the functionality in that solution and the ways we need to use it to help perform tasks or do our jobs. Again, really simple. I know not all the full bespoke ISO definition there, but it's the kind of way to help give people an insight into what the slight variation is. So you may remember the phrase from our CUA, know thy user. So I wanted to call out some examples of activities that processes and things that we use in both hats to understand what the problems are that we're trying to solve and who the users are we're trying to solve it for. So in observation, or in business analysis terms, we'll call that shadowing. We're both observing someone actively working in their environment. However, the lenses, again, will be different from what we're focusing on. So a usability analyst might look at more the ethnographic side of things and all the bits and pieces in the whole holistic situation to go into what someone's trying to achieve there. Whereas the BA will be more focused on what are the key tasks, what are the steps, what are the flows, that someone is needing to do that. And they'll also be a little bit around, it's not completely black and white. They'll also be looking at what seems to frustrate the user the most, and that will obviously influence priorities. Similarly, we've got the interview side of things. the usability analysts will need to obviously be very careful with how they construct their questions and deliver them. The BA can tend to be a little bit more direct because it's more about factual, functional things rather than subjective elements, which all play into the whole experience. Focus groups and workshops. So obviously we do similar things for different purposes, but equally it's a good way to get some quick feedback, or in the BA world get a good grasp of what the requirements are in a short space of time from all the key stakeholders without having to go around and talk to them all individually. It's also a great way to resolve disagreements between stakeholders for BAs. So often you'll have two warring opinions, and it's a good way to help them understand each other's perspective and hopefully agree on a solution. It most of the time works, but not all the time. But either way, both types of situations or activities need to be carefully monitored and managed, so that ensure that there's not just one voice, but everyone gets to be heard. Surveys, again, we both use this for quantitative rather than qualitative data gathering, but again, depending on the lens, will actually determine the way you ask the questions. It will also determine the way, what the outcome is you're trying to get there, and the way you deliver the survey as well, and to get people to fill that out. So it's both serves a similar purpose, but is managed in different ways. And then you've got an example of diary studies. So we might do time and motion in the BA space, but that requires usually a bit more of a shadowing approach. So a lot more hands-on, a lot more physically present, whereas the UA thing can be a bit more hands-off, but still requires to be managed quite a bit. So something that might be used a little bit less. Once you've got this information from the research, obviously we will look to output that. Now, this is kind of, I know that this, about personas and about storyboarding and all that kind of thing. However, when it comes to sort of doing a little bit of both, or doing a light touch aspect, which I know probably Eric and Apala and everyone is shuddering at the thought of, unfortunately, this is the practical world I live in, and I'm gradually battling the fight there. But I'm using personas are becoming more and more commonplace in what we're trying to do to understand the users that we're designing for. So I'm actually in the process of creating a catalog of personas for my audience. So the idea is that technology people who don't get to interact with the end user base, even though we work in the same company, it's helping them understand a little bit more about where the people are coming from. And so when they start work on a project, they can say, okay, these are for the lawyers, and these are what the lawyers are trying to do, and what their challenges and everything are. So therefore, when I make a choice between, something that's high performant and something which takes a little bit of time, I'm going to go for option A. And ideally, this persona would then be taken, lifted, moved into a project, evolved for that project to fit the user profiles within that project, and then hopefully shared and updated in the global database. So we're constantly growing, evolving, and sharing this knowledge. One of the things I like to do as a BA, though, is we do BDD type requirements, so behavioral driven design type requirements. And part of that requirement is to define acceptance criteria. And this is where I like to put what the user requirements are for a design, or the design instructions. So where a usability person or a designer may have said we need to do X, we need to make sure we use radio buttons rather than checkboxes and things like that. I'll write that into the story or the narrative of the acceptance criteria, which describes to the functional testers what needs to be done. And it also describes to the developers clearly what they need to be building and the way they need to be building it. So we're ensuring everything's covered there. So looking at processes. So we've obviously, I wanted to show them next to each other because it's just always nice to see a picture and show 1,000 words, obviously. But you've obviously got the user-centered design lifecycle, which is a lot more aligned with the agile methodologies, where you get to identify the situation, design something for it, actually build something, evaluate it, and then rejig and retest until you've got something great. In my organization, we tend to follow a lot more linear approach, which is the diagram you can see on the right. This is because a lot of what we're doing is replacing existing technologies when they come out of date, or we've got there's a massive business change and the infrastructure is just not fit for purpose anymore. So a lot of the time we have our MVP is is effectively a working system of functions. So we have to start there, and we have to build onto that and try and add in any enhancements and improvements as we go along, if not afterwards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step through the process. So I'll jump onto that slide. Step through the process that we've got there, the linear one, and kind of call out some of the key activities and how there's similarities, how we both benefit from them, and all the differences and how we complement and use each other's potentially. Obviously, I have to make peace with trying to do both myself. And one of the things to note is that from my point of view, I don't get to do the full life cycle of a project. A lot of the time I'm parachuted in at different stages depending on where there's identified a need. And this is mostly because there's only one of me in my organization, and we have at least 50 projects simultaneously running at any given time. So it's just physically not possible for me to do everything I need to do. So one of the, an example of that is the test preparation and support. There might be an isolated expert review where I kind of assess it against the Vim principles and other accessibility principles for fit for purpose just before we go into user acceptance testing. You and I all know that that is far too late in the process for it to deliver any real benefits. However, a lot of that information is taken to either A, be a showstopper, say, look, we can't go live without this being resolved. It happens very rarely, but it does sometimes. But also it feeds into the training and support guides that come after that. So if nothing else, I'm helping people learn things a little bit quicker. So in the scoping phase, we both the business and usability analyst needs to understand what the business objectives and goals are. So there's no point in delivering a pretty UI if it's not actually going to serve a purpose. At this point, I expect the UA to be understanding the customer drivers and goals. If a solution already exists, both of us would be looking to understand what the issues and challenges are with that. So the UA may be doing some usability testing and other various activities. And the BA will probably be looking at more interviews and workshops to kind of just hear firsthand from people what their big pain points are. So you can see how there's an unconscious versus conscious there, which could be assessed by both parties. And so ideally the results would come together to help give a clear picture of what the real problems are and why they're occurring. We both need to understand who the stakeholders are, and obviously that would then drive into the user research and production of personas for the solution that you're trying to deliver or the problem you're trying to solve. We would both need to understand the risks. So if to both the users and the business, if we didn't do certain things or we did do certain things, what the risks are. And also there's the vendor demonstrations. So when we're considering solutions, we'll often have previews by a number of vendors who are considering for the solution. And in that case, you'd have the BA with the, does it tick all the boxes of the things we need it to do? And the UA going, does it deliver what we need it to do in a user-friendly, great UI kind of design? With the requirement solicitation phase, this is where I just document a big long list of written requirements, as I touched on before, where you'd have what the requirement is and what the acceptance criteria is. We'd also look to get some user requirements from the usability analyst. And the UA would hopefully use some of these requirements to start thinking about the design aspect of what needs to be happening there. We'd produce a number of different artifacts. Mine might demonstrate a flow diagram, which is the workflow, whereas the UA would potentially demonstrate sorry, my cat's trying to get up. The UA would demonstrate the touch points, which actually also a really good way of eliciting the requirements that may have been missed through not having that kind of 3D look on things. Requirements validation and prioritization. So I'm more of an analyst than a designer, though I can obviously make recommendations as to what features or functions would be best served to meet the UA. I'm not very good at making things look pretty in a good usable way as well. And I have a big bugbear with trying to produce designs which actually physically can't be built in the infrastructure that we're using. So I like to work closely with the design and development teams to ensure that whatever we pull together is actually going to be, before we present to the stakeholders for sign off, is going to be worthwhile. Using the UA wireframes here, I find this is something that's becoming really valuable and very popular in the BA community, is that it's a really good way to validate requirements. So it ensures that we're all seeing the same picture in our heads. The UAs are, oh, I've gone way over time. The UAs are, the wireframes, sorry, are going to be, the stakeholders are going to understand what's happening. They're going to be have confident that we know what we're going to deliver and what they're going to be getting, no matter how long it takes to deliver it. And then taking that a little bit further, you've got the interactive or high fidelity wireframes and the solution validation control. So there's obviously the cost saving of doing this before you write lines of code, and that will produce, help, again, elicit more requirements where you may have missed them through the interactive, moving from slide A to slide B, but also it will ensure that you're getting things right and building things the right way. One challenge with that is that the stakeholders will often think that it takes too long to build something. They've already seen this tool working, they've got it, they've played with it. Why is it taking you so long to deliver it? And they don't really understand the fundamentals behind it. So there's some key stakeholder management required there. And then in the testing and prep, you'll feed into user acceptance testing criteria. You'll be reviewing test scripts, and you potentially reviewing defects to sort of help. Both parties will need to do that to help understand where the problems lie, whether it's user experience, design change, or whether it's actually a bug and things like that. And then obviously at the go live support, both of us will be factoring into the training support and the support and transition phases. Right. Last slide. This is just something, I'm going to share this pack with you, or I'm going to provide it to Judy to share with everyone. This is just a little cheat sheet that I like to produce for BAs to kind of start thinking about the more usability elements and user experience elements when they're eliciting requirements. So this is something potentially you might be able to take away and build upon, fill in your own gaps. Again, it's very high level and very simplistic, but as I said, you've got to start somewhere, and you've got to start people changing that mindset. And this is one of the things I have sort of found, you can actually write functional and non-functional requirements off the back of a lot of these kinds of answers to a lot of these questions. So it helps start somewhere. Anyway, any questions? Right, sorry for running over, Noah. You don't actually see the.
That's all right, and we can maybe. I know that Lisa's presentation, she's going to be fairly concise, so we'll be all right.
Sure.
So the main question I see, that the top question, and I'll mention, by the way, this was asked before you got into that last couple of slides. This was asked earlier on, so you may feel that this has been answered somewhat. The question is that business analysis and user research overlap a lot at times. How do you make sure that the non-intersecting parts don't overpower each other in our heads and we end up with the wrong research or path?
That's a good question. I mean, at the end of the day, I guess it's ensuring that at the end of the day, it's about what's putting the user at the center of it all, I suppose. And you've got to be like, well, is the best, are we going to taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture, and where is the user focus going to be detrimental to the business, and therefore you don't have a business to support the users on, and vice versa. It's a tricky one. I think it has to be managed on a case-by-case basis, if I'm honest. I think the different type of solution you're trying to produce, or the different work that you're doing, could tilt either way. But yeah, it's something I'm constantly wrestling with in my head as I wear both hats in that space. But yeah, hopefully some of the other slides help address some of that.
Awesome. All right. Cool. So I'm seeing some other questions. Let's do just one more of these. And
Would you please slow down in talking? Is that one of the questions? I often get that.
I mean, I'm seeing a lot of people showing
what
appreciation in chat. I'm showing a lot of people showing appreciation in chat, and I, speaking only for myself, but I thought there was a lot of great detail that you shared with us, and so I think that's very generous. So there are 3 questions that have all gotten upvotes, gotten 1. I'm just taking a quick look. Yeah, so I think this is an important question. Subradeep asks, I've seen some user stories segregated as technical user stories, elaborating system criteria more aligned with the technical needs, while UX needs are outlined in functional user stories. Is that effective, or should both aspects be combined in a single user story?
I think it depends. I've seen both. Like we do both. Actually, we do put them into our non-functional type requirements. A lot of the user experience side of things. Like if it's going to be keyboard navigable, if it's going to, a lot of the accessibility stuff sits within the non-functional space. However, the functional side of things, I think you kind of can't do one without the other. So I think it makes sense that most of the detail probably should live in the functional or the centric space. With those requirements, that's the way I would definitely work it. As I said, I like to try and incorporate the accessibility criteria, how it's going to actually work, and all the kind of key features it needs to actually do from a behavioral point of view to deliver that. I think you need to tell a story in one place to get the full sweep of it. But
Awesome.
definitely accessibility can sit outside of the non-functionals.
Great. Okay, thank you so much, Sarah. Here, I will take the spotlight again. Oh,
Thank you. I'll stop my